Welcome to the New Big Five podcast. I'm Graham Greene. My guest today is the American photographer Steve McCurry. Steve, thanks for being on the New Big Five podcast.
Pleasure to be here.
I know that you've been traveling and I know you're heading out again in a few days. I wondered, do you still spend most of your life on the road?
You know, you need to be home and go through your work and spend time with family. So I'm trying to keep a balance, but I do spend a lot of time on the road. I'd hate to put a number of months. It would probably be kind of scary. It could be half the year, could be a lot more, but I'm trying to go to places and do things which are enriching and interesting and that add to my body of work and try and make the planet a better place. Tell stories I think are worth, looking at and talking about.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that because you've been doing this for about 45 years. And I guess the worst thing for any photographer would be to feel like you're repeating yourself or doing something you're very familiar with. Are you always trying to push out into something new and, get out of your comfort zone?
Exactly. I want to go to places that even without a camera, I would be interested in spending time. So often on assignments, you're basically going to places that other people are interested in that you may not have a personal stake or an interest or a passion. So for me, I'm really now trying to decide, what interests me, what's important to me, what statement do I want to make about the world or about life or about humanity.
You talk about going out to find something particularly that interests you, not necessarily an editor, but how do you put your sort of finger on that? What is it that interests you?
Well, I'm interested in human behavior. I'm interested in going to a place, walking around, and just seeing what is it about this place that interests me. What do I want to learn about here? What is it that what kind of people do I want to meet? And it's really more of a personal approach. I'm not saying to myself, well, now I got to get this, I got to get that, I got to get a street view, I got to get a picture of people working, playing, something to do with religion, something to do with the economy. I may just kind of literally wander and just shoot people interacting on the street without really not looking for those big place centers, those establishing shots. For me, I think human behavior, how we relate to each other, how we relate to the environment, how we relate to animals. That's kind of what I think motivates me and kind of gets my juices flowing.
Yeah, I know from my own experience, and I haven't been doing it anywhere near as long as you, but life on the road has its challenges and it can take its toll on you. It seems that you're kind of undimmed about that. You still enjoy the adventure of it. You're still as curious as you were.
Well, yeah, I was just in Madagascar, I guess, last week. And I thought it was amazing going to a new place, seeing new things. They have these wonderful animals and these wonderful trees, which are just like unique in the world. So it was a thrill to go to a new place, meet new people. Madagascar is unlike any other place in the world. So I still get a buzz. I still get a rush off of traveling and going to new places, and even going back to the old places and seeing how things have changed. This is what feels right for me, and it's been an amazing life.
Yeah, I know that it started, going right back in the day in 1979, you were jumping over fences, wearing disguises and exploring war-torn Afghanistan. I wondered, have your interests and what you're looking for changed a lot over the years? And have you mellowed with age, or are you still hopping over fences every now and again?
Well, I think certain things work at different times in your life. I think when I was in my 20s and maybe 30s, I was more willing to take risks, I remember in Afghanistan, it got dark and we literally laid down on the ground. It was November, it was pretty damn cold. And literally lay down on the ground and tried to sleep like a pack of dogs. It was, I'm less inclined to want to do that now. I kind of feel like I've kind of had that kind of experience. I've kind of I don't want to go back and kind of repeat myself. I've been to Afghanistan about 30 times.
Yeah.
Uh, I was there about 3 years ago, and walking around, it wasn't particularly safe or easy, but I kind of felt like, you know what, I've done this already, so many times. I think I've kind of said what I've had to say about Afghanistan. Now it's time to find a new challenge, something new to explore.
There's nothing wrong with a hotel room now and then, is there, Steve?
Well, getting shot at is okay at some point, I suppose. But I have a family now, so I'm not. I'm less inclined to want to put myself in danger. And I think back on so many of those situations, and in many cases, there were no important pictures that really came out of those situations. So in a way, there wasn't any purpose to it in a way.
Yeah. I'm sure that most people listening to this will know your work well, and they'll know your story. But I just want to give a quick recap. Steve is a Magnum photographer and a Nat Geo photographer. His Afghan Girl photo remains, I think, the most famous cover that's ever run on Nat Geo. As we've talked about already, he's covered war zones from Afghanistan to Colombia and photographed many people around the world, not only refugees and soldiers, but also people like monks and fishermen and farmers. But the particular reason we're talking to him today for the New Big Five is a different subject. His latest book is called Animals. I remember, Steve, that we talked about a year ago and you mentioned this book, and it seems surprising because so many people will know you and associate your name with photography of people. I know that people are still involved with this, aren't they? But can you tell us a bit about this collection of photos?
Well, ever since I started photographing, I mean, my whole life I've been fascinated with animals. Any kind of animals, dogs, cats, elephants, camels, whatever. So it was kind of natural for me when I started photographing to, when I saw animals in interesting situations, to photograph them. And I traveled all over the world many, many times and did all kinds of stories, from elephants logging in Burma to, the Galapagos Islands to, animals acting as beasts of burden or pets or whatever. So I've always been this fascination with animals and kind of trying to imagine what their life is like, and trying to document how we interact, how we relate to animals. And I just, it's an endless source of fascination for me. Like I said earlier, in Madagascar, I spent a lot of time with the lemurs, these incredible, beautiful, gentle creatures. And it's so important for us as the world, overheats and is overpopulated, and we're all this sort of urban sprawl, that we have to pay attention to our fellow animals, and we have to try and take care of them, because in many cases they're dependent on our goodwill and our generosity and our compassion. You look at so many animals and their habitats being lost, the orangutans and elephants and on and on and on, and the oceans. So we're at a kind of a critical stage here. It's often hard to be optimistic about where this all is leading to, because we seem to be on the razor's edge in many cases of these different animals' survival. It's really quite alarming, actually.
Yeah, have you reported on stories like that? Have you worked on covering those sort of frontline stories?
Yeah, I've tried to, while I'm in a country, Thailand or Burma or China, I've tried to photograph people trying to solve these problems, and I've donated prints and money to various organizations that are trying to, save the different animal World Wildlife Fund and different organizations.
It seemed, looking through the book, that a lot of people in many countries around the world live a lot closer to nature than we do in Western countries. I remember there's a photo of a snake crawling right under someone's hammock. Well, I wondered what your thoughts are on that. Do you think we've lost something from being disconnected from nature?
Yeah, I think we go into the supermarket and we go and buy a cut of meat or a fish or something, and it's in a plastic wrapper, and you kind of don't realize where this has come from and the consequence to the environment. I don't know. It is a. Uh, I kind of I feel like we have a lot to learn about treating animals and how we eat animals and all of that. It's I look at our cardboard containers and they're cutting down these rainforests in Indonesia and Brazil. Well, the Brazil is for cattle, but in many cases for wood that ends up as boxes for packaging and wrapping and all this. It's just endless.
Mm.
It's where's it going to end? So I think we have to continue to educate ourselves and to try and be conscious of what we're doing to the environment.
Yeah. Do you live with animals yourself? Do you have pets?
I had a dog when I was very young. I wanted to get a rescue dog or cat for my daughter. I think it's important. I didn't want to obviously to get one from a puppy mill. I think if we can find one that's been, I don't know, discarded or whatever, I think it's a great experience for a child to grow up with an animal, have to take care for the animal, understand that the animal has feelings and has its own personality. I think that's an important experience to have at least once in your life.
I always think it's funny when you read those stories in the newspaper about someone who's kept a tiger in their bathroom or a crocodile in the pond. You weren't tempted, having worked on this book, to get an elephant at home or a lion or something like that?
I saw a picture of the 1930s of a woman in a cafe in Paris with her leopard on a dog leash. I mean, different time, I suppose, but I think these animals belong in their natural habitat. I think of all these sort of elephant rides you can get in Thailand and India. That really has to stop. I mean, if people knew how these animals were treated, hopefully they'd be horrified, because once the tourists leave, they get chained up and they spend the night. They feed them a little bit of food and they're chained. And these majestic creatures are basically tortured so that tourists can, take a ride in the forest. That really has to end.
Yeah, I agree. I remember seeing monkeys chained up in the main square in Marrakesh, and snakes, cobras that have been defanged, and all this kind of stuff. There's actually a quote in your book, isn't it? We can judge the heart of a man by his treatment of animals.
Yeah, I totally feel that if we are, you have to judge a person's character by how compassionate they are to their animals, to a horse or a mule or a donkey. So many places in the world are dependent on beasts of burden, whether it be a camel or a buffalo to plow the field, or they use many places transportation. They'll hook up a horse or a mule to a carriage, and you see these people whipping these animals to go uphill, and it just breaks your heart, because they're trapped. They're prisoners. That was fine 1,000 years ago, but I think we can do better. I mean, yeah. I know I have to be realistic about the world we live in, but I think it's something we can strive for.
Absolutely. Yeah, I agree. I'm just going to pause there, Steve, and mention to people who are listening that this podcast that we're doing is part of the New Big Five project, where we're creating a new Big Five of wildlife. The old Big Five, as most people know, was based on the toughest animals in Africa for hunters to shoot and kill. The new Big Five that we're setting up is all about wildlife photography rather than hunting. So I do want to ask people listening to go onto the New Big Five website and to vote for their own personal choice for 5 animals they'd like to be included in the New Big Five. Steve, I'm asking every photographer that I speak with to name their personal top 5 of wild animals, either to photograph themselves or to see in photos. I wondered what your choice of 5 would be.
Oh boy. Well, you have to put the elephant at the top. I think the big cats, hippos are on the list, rhinos, of course, giraffe. I think that I look at a giraffe or an elephant, they're so vulnerable, they're so big, and they just kind of lumber along, minding their own business. They're vegetarian. And I feel so sad that they're so vulnerable to poachers. I saw a picture of Donald Trump's son some time ago, a year or two ago, holding the tail of an elephant.
Yeah.
And it was shortly after I had just come back from Kenya, and I was in the Amboseli game park. And these elephants would literally walk across in front of your vehicle, to just 5 meters, 10 meters. And the thought of killing one of those, you could literally hit one with a rock. They were that close. And to think there's some sort of sport or there's some sort of pleasure out of murdering one of these animals, I mean, there's no skill involved. It's just, just pointing your gun at close range. And it just, I mean, if we had people at that level of society that are presumably educated that still are so clueless about the planet we live on and take pleasure out of killing these animals, that's a pretty sad state of affairs.
I couldn't agree more, Steve, really. But your 5 then would be hippo, rhino, giraffe, elephant, and one of the big cats?
Yeah, lion, cheetah. I mean, I don't know if they could be considered the big, the lion certainly, but I think elephant for me would be right at the top of the list.
Why is that?
Well, they're an intelligent animal. They're gentle. They care for their young. I mean, I've seen countless videos of elephants and how they interact among themselves. They seem a very kind of gentle, caring, and I just find them such a beautiful creature. And they're just kind of minding their own business. Again, they just feed. They eat. They're vegetarian, as are the giraffe, and they're relatively harmless unless you probably get between them and their calves. To me, I just love elephants.
Yeah, it's one of my favorites too. I'm kind of surprised that gorilla wasn't on there. I know in the new book in Animals there's a great photo of a gorilla from that I think you took in Uganda.
So that could definitely be on the list. It's hard to exclude it, actually. I mean, being that close to gorillas and seeing how they're so powerful, and yet the way that we've got so close, and they were. So they were not threatening at all. That they would climb these enormous trees, like 300 pounds, and they climb these trees effortlessly. They could just knock you down with one, swipe with their claw, or their hand, or their paw, or whatever. No, they were an amazing animal to see them at close range.
Did photographing the gorillas, did it have a big effect on you? I mean, for me, it's one of those incredible wildlife experiences to be so close to, these giants. They look so powerful, so gentle. Was it a real encounter?
It was profound to see them and how they relate to their children, to their young. I mean, these big, powerful beasts, and the way they're so gentle. And you can say that about a lot of these animals. The elephants, how they come together to help each other. And with the gorillas, they were so kind and gentle and caring for their young. It was just a beautiful thing to observe. And they're vegetarian too.
Do you have a soft spot for veggies?
Well, I think that I think we really have to think twice about what we eat. That's kind of a controversial topic. I think that in an ideal world, we could probably do without eating meat or fish. I think the oceans are in peril, great peril. I think that I'm not sure how healthy some of these fish with all the contaminants and I think that the way animals are treated, pigs and beef and chickens, if you knew how these animals were treated, I think we would all be vegetarian in a heartbeat. And there's probably no real reason why we need to eat meat. There was a great film recently made by a friend of mine, Luis Ahoyas, and it's about people who have become vegan. And I just think we have to rethink the whole thing and, really consider these animals and how they're being treated in these really terrible conditions.
Yeah. I'm going to have to push you, Steve. You've named about 7 animals. Can we get it down to 5? Elephant, gorilla, rhino, giraffe, lion, hippo. Which would have to go?
Let's take the hippo off the list.
Okay, that works.
I would say it would not be one of my 5 favorites.
I wanted to ask, with animals, we talked about the fact that a lot of the photos are with people. But with pure wildlife photography, how does your approach change? Because it seems to me that there are even some overlaps with your people photography. There's eye contact with the animals. There's some similarities in composition. Could you just talk a little bit about how you approach wildlife photography?
I think the best wildlife photography is animal behavior, and that takes it to another level. I mean, getting a portrait of an animal is great. Nice light to get expression. Maybe the animal's stretching or yawning or whatever. But it's always great to get some sort of a behavioral shot where they're actually doing something. They're hunting or they're doing something, sleeping or so. I don't know. It just takes an enormous amount of time and patience. And I think that the really great wildlife photographers really understand the behavior of the animals and are able to anticipate. And I know with any kind of photography, to be able to understand the moment and try to put yourself in, to anticipate to who's going to walk where and how's the situation going to unfold. And there's this wonderful something on a wall and you're waiting for somebody to walk past it or whatever. I think the best photographers are the ones that have a real deep understanding of animal behavior and can anticipate when something incredible is going to happen. But it just takes time and patience. And it's like photographing children. It can happen quickly, unexpectedly. And once it happens, it may not happen again. And so you have to be ready for that moment, and it may not come back again.
Yeah, I think that's one of the most enjoyable, for me anyway, for wildlife photography. I think that's one of the most enjoyable parts of it. There's a real adrenaline. If a moment passes, you won't get a second shot. You can't ask someone to go back and, a lion or an elephant doesn't go back and do that exact same behavior again. Is that how you felt?
Oh, that's absolutely true. Yeah. It's even with an expression. You're photographing somebody and there's that expression, there's that laugh, that whatever, and you can't repeat it. I mean, you can ask, you just can't. Once that moment's gone, it's just gone, and either you got it or you didn't. And with animals, because they're so unpredictable and they're just wandering around, and they're not necessarily going into the good light. I remember with the gorillas, they were walking around and they walked over this stream. So I take my shoes off and I walk across the stream on these slippery rocks. And as soon as I got off on the other side of the stream, they immediately crossed back over the same stream, which kind of threw, it's like they were, I don't know if they were just making a joke or whatever, but it was funny that they were just doing their own thing, and it's very hard to keep up with them.
Yeah. For pure wildlife photography, do you have a favorite location, a favorite place, either a country or a national park?
Well, I think that you know the Serengeti and the crater, the Ngorongoro crater, is really hard to beat. It's more rich to me there than say. I was in India recently looking for tigers, and that was very challenging. Unfortunately, they killed most of their tigers back in the last century, and there's very few left. And you can literally go into a reserve and spend the entire day and not even not see anything.
So would Tanzania top the list? I mean, you mentioned Serengeti and Ngorongoro. I think I love it there, and I think yeah. So would Tanzania be your top
I
wildlife
would say
destination?
so, yeah, I would say so. Yeah.
For what kind of animals?
Oh, rhino, lion, wildebeest. That migration is epic and biblical, and just sort of it's just something which is incredible to see. Yeah, I think that that's kind of for me the and of course as I keep going back to elephants wherever they may be, and whether Kenya or Tanzania or uh, is just the most amazing, or even and I photographed them in Sri Lanka and Burma, and it's just they're so agile too. You never imagine how they could walk up a fairly steep hill, sometimes on their not exactly called hands and knees, but it's something like that.
Talking of Tanzania, I was in Ruaha National Park last year. Have you ever been there? It's one of the best wildlife locations I've ever been to.
Oh no, I haven't. I should put that on my list.
It's for me, it's as good as it gets. So, I saw leopards jumping out of trees and incredible birds, and the number of big cats and elephants is huge. Yeah.
What's that again? Where was that location?
Ruaha, it's Ruaha.
Uh huh.
It's
Okay.
It's in Tanzania. It's massive. It's remote. It's bigger than the Serengeti, but it's wild, and yeah, it's much wilder. It's less populated. It's less busy with tourists, and it's fantastic. Landscape's always changing, and you see so much wildlife.
Oh, that's great.
As we talked about earlier, you've been photographing the world, I think, for 45 years. I don't think many people will have seen as much of it as you have. And one of the things we're looking at on the new Big Five is conservation and climate change, both issues that we've already talked about. And I wondered what your sense of a global perspective on how we're doing currently is. What have you seen around the world? Are we making any progress at all, or is it actually quite, I don't know, is the outlook quite bleak at the moment?
Well, there's a lot of people that are very passionate and are trying to do important things. The question, I guess, is it happening fast enough? I just think that I'm just not sure it's happening fast enough. I mean, recently we lost so many koala bears in Australia during the fires. It just seems like things are moving really slowly, and I don't think we. I think in the end, most of these animals are going to be in protected, almost like enclosures. That it's going to be really hard to. I know the lemurs in Madagascar, where I just came from, they're still being killed for bushmeat. I know parts of Gabon and different places, monkeys are being killed, and even the gorillas are being killed for trophies and whatnot. Uh, the size of where the gorillas are in Rwanda and Uganda, it's an extremely small area, and you just wonder if things went sideways. And tourism is so important to keep some of these places operational too. Without all that cash coming in, uh, you wonder what would happen in that case. You wonder if without the tourism and the money for wildlife, how soon would it be before a lot of these parts of Kenya and Tanzania would just become cattle ranches, and push the animals to the brink. I think there's a lot of people, things are moving rapidly in the right direction, but is it fast enough? You look at poaching, the elephants, the rhino horns and the elephant tusks. How is it possible? How can people be so uncaring and still want to, buy ivory jewelry or have the notion that this rhino horn is going to somehow be an aphrodisiac? It boggles the mind.
Yeah.
So I don't know. It's just it's a hard one, but we'll see. But I don't know. If indeed climate change keeps escalating, and people are going to be more concerned with their home and their next meal, and it's going to become a much more dire situation. So I don't know. It's hard to be optimistic.
Yeah, I think one of the things you and I have talked about before is your sort of frustration as a journalist that, you were covering situations, I'm thinking more in terms of refugees and war zones, things that were happening 20, 30, 40 years ago that you're still kind of seeing now. And do you have that sense with wildlife and with conservation too, that it must be very frustrating to report on the front line of something, hope that some change is going to happen, and then here we are, in this time and place where the change isn't happening?
Yeah, it's very frustrating. I mean, the conversation in the U.S. now, you turn on the TV, it's all mostly political. I don't know. It seems to me that it's about 85, 90% just, this sort of internal bickering. I guess you could say the same thing for the UK. Very few people are really, it's not being reported. People kind of gloss over, and it's just not part of the conversation. I mean, it is with some people, of course, but it's just hard to get people's attention when you're competing with their football club or some basketball game or whatever, shopping for Christmas. I mean, it's just people don't have the time to really focus on these issues.
Has photographing these stories helped you become more passionate about it? Photographing gorillas, I imagine, really makes you more committed to that cause and all the climate change causes and those kind of things. Has photographing been part of your own development, your own process of thought?
Oh, absolutely. I think when you go to these places and you see the area where they're living, the animals are living, and I was really shocked to see in this Ambosella Game Park, the animals, all the roads, the ranches, the farms, the hotels, it's all sort of becoming, kind of where does their habitat end, and where does the kind of the hotel begin, or the ranch or the cattle? It's all very small and very fragile. And I think once you see how fragile these locations, I think photography, going to these places, seeing their habitat and understanding that the pressures, it really, you see, this is not an easy problem to solve. We got to really work a little bit harder to help these animals.
Yeah. Steve, I could always happily talk to you all day, but I think that's as good a place as any to end. All the best with whatever you have coming up next. Where are you heading off to?
I'm going to Antarctica next week.
Have you been before?
I've never been there, so I think once in my life I wanted to experience that. Before the ice is all gone.
Yeah.
But that's not going to happen in the near future. But I don't know. I just wanted to see it at least once.
It's a fantastic place. I look forward to seeing your photos from there.
Thank you, Graham. All the best.
To everyone listening, please go on to the New Big Five website, newbig5.com, and vote for your choices to include in the New Big Five of wildlife photography. On the website, you can find many more podcasts, as well as interviews with photographers and conservationists, articles on climate change, conservation and the world's wildlife, photography tips, photo galleries and plenty more. Please help us spread the word about the New Big Five project by sharing it on social media. #NewBig5. You can also find us on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, YouTube and Vimeo. If you'd like to get involved with the project, drop us a line. Contact details are on the website. Thanks for listening.